What's up, everybody? Hope you're well. Really appreciate all the comments and messages. Makes me happy to see them and read them. Specifically, Sugar Tone Music, thank you for the response. You asked me to do a little bit about Quartet Drive guitar, so we're gonna do that today. A little gospel music for everyone, which is dear to my heart. It's something that I got into a little bit later on in my music life, but some of my favorite moments were playing for Michelle White in the Bronx. Shout out to everybody at Greater Faith Tabernacle. It was a great time for me, and I miss it. I should actually get back there. Anyway, let's play a little bit of Quartet Drive, and then we can talk about it after. Just a little drum beat, key of E. Yeah. Woo. I can play this all day, man. Woo. All right, let me stop. But basically, what is it? It's just the jam, I guess, after the song, or it's just that moment where you just let loose and you drive, right? That's the way I was explained. Obviously, I didn't grow up in this country, so I wasn't fortunate enough to grow up in the church, playing music all the time. But it had an interesting effect for me because I had to learn it at a later age. So I looked at it more from an analytical point, and I tried to put a lot of those feels together. So the first thing I noticed about that kind of drive, quartet playing, is a lot of people were playing the third. They were playing major thirds and minor thirds. So I was like, what is that? Is that like, is it a dominant sound? Is it a minor sound? What's going on? Like people were playing, you know, you have like an E7, but then you were still hearing like, so how do those two thirds work together, right? I mean, how do you get, and still get, right? And a lot of people said, oh, well, it's not really an exact thing. It's just minor and dominant together, and it's somewhere in between, which I get, you know, not everything doesn't have to be analytical and written on paper, but the way I always looked at it was actually borrowing from the 4 chord. So if you have the 1 chord, right, like we're playing an E, right? So the 1 being E7. If you have a major third, if you borrow from the 4 chord for a second, you can't, that third, that G sharp, which is the third of E, when you play the A, that's a major 7. That's that's too pretty. That doesn't feel good. So you lower it to a G natural, right? You get that 7 sound, which is the same, you know, same sound. That 7th dominant sound. But if you're playing it against E, it sounds like a minor third. But I always thought about it as the dominant 7th of the borrowed 4 chord, if that makes any sense. Well, to me it does. There's no like official rule book for gospel music as far as I'm concerned. If there is, I'd love to find it, but it wasn't like classical or later on even jazz, like, you know, they teach jazz in school now, which wasn't always the case. But for gospel music, it's still kind of a little bit on the feel side, which is great, but I had to figure out a way to approach it. So I always thought about it as the 4 chord against the 1. So you get things like, you know, a 1 chord, but you can still play, excuse me, right? You're getting that minor third. And what's really cool is you can combine the thirds. Like I see a lot of people playing like a minor third in one octave and a major third in another. So you can go. It's weird, but it works. I always love that kind of stuff. So then, you know, you start borrowing things based on those two relationships. So you'll play, you know, like an E chord, but then you play G to A. I don't know, those two were always felt like they're coming from the 4. And then, you know, some devices to play over Quartet Drive that were very helpful to me. Someone always said, man, just play the 1-2, and I always was wondering what that is. And then I figured, if you start inverting chords, like, again, we're in E, right? So if you play, the 1 chord would be E, the 2 chord would be F sharp minor, right? So you get E, F sharp minor, and then, you know, you can invert it, E, F sharp minor, E, F sharp minor, E, F sharp minor, right? F sharp minor, E, F sharp minor, E. So you can just, with those 2 chords, you can play all this stuff. And that can go a really long way. You start creating melodies with it. Some people treat the 4 chord with a 1-2, so like they'll go 1, right? So they'll play like E, and then the 4 chord would be A, and then they'll play the 2 of A, which is B minor, right? And then back to E, and then back to A, and then back to B minor, and then to E, right? A, B. I don't know, and you can get so much melodic content out of just that little formula. It's just the 1-2. And like I said, there's no like real official rule book as far as I'm concerned. And if there is, like I said, hit me to it. But it's just a feel-good thing. You know, I was a kid. I was trying to learn that sound. I mean, of course, I got the oil. You know, it came later, but the sound was something that I couldn't just find a book and say, how do you play this gospel sound? But I had to just sit down and listen and annoy a bunch of people to get things like the 1-2, or then figure out the 4 over the 1, and that really helped me formulate a sort of a guideline that I could play in, if that makes any sense. I hope that doesn't confuse. But yeah, minor third, and then major third. They kind of coexist, and just, you know, with taste, see where one fits and one doesn't. That's another cool thing is, if you think about it, and this comes from the blues, but you know, this is playing the third. You know, it's just, I'm not bending any of the strings, and it sounds very like vanilla, for lack of better description, right? And then if you just put the third sort of in between a major and a minor, this note doesn't really exist. But when you, right, it's kind of out of tune. Like if you played against an E, that's not a good place to park. But when you're just passing through it, I always found that it sounded better. Like, what sounds better to you? If I play it and I go, or it just feels better. You know, so there's a lot of stuff that's not in the theory books, but is just putting mileage on it and seeing where it takes you. Anyway, I hope that helps. If you want something covered, let me know. Have a great day. See ya.